Long before the Scarlery Railway came into existence, there was a smaller plate-laid line from the port of Ballad Vale to Crosney Curin, which continued up to the hills of Ward Fell. It was owned by the Crovensgate Mining Company and used it to deliver ore from the copper mines at Ward Fell to Ballad Vale for shipping. At the time, steam locomotives were not very common, and most railways in Britain had yet to have a fleet of them, so most of them, including this one, used pack horses to pull the heavy wagons to and from the mine and port. This little line would be modified 60 years later when the Scarlery Railway was built and its first 2 engines arrived. While the mine at Ward Fell was no different from any other, it did have one particular aspect that made it stand out. Upon one of the mountains stood a large mysterious boulder. No one knows how long it had been there, but it has been believed to have existed long before the mining company was formed. Eventually, the mine closed in 1909 and the line between it and Ballad Well was ripped up, as there was no longer any need for the port. The line had also shifted its focus from ore to not only passengers but slate as well. They, along with any other goods, were transported to the mainland via the Sodor and Mainland Railway and later the North Western. Despite the focus change, there was no definite answer to why the copper mine closed. Neither the railwaymen or the 2 engines, Scarlery and Renaeus, talked about it, and soon theories were created regarding the subject. The most popular belief is that it was simply due to a lack of traffic, and indeed, all traffic did reduce at the start of the 20th century. However, that wasn't the main reason. In fact, the truth of the mine's closure was a lot more unusual and more terrifying than anyone could imagine. Ward Fell copper mine remained abandoned for many years, and the boulder stood alone for a long time. That was until one day in the spring of 1972. The Thing controller and Mr. Hugh discovered that the rock from the mountains in the area could be useful for all the railways of Sodor. Soon, a new quarry in Ward Fell was built, and a line was constructed from Crosney Curin. The workmen and miners did notice the boulder, but didn't think much of it. "It's only a big rock, it's not like it's going to attack us or anything," they would say. A few weeks have passed, and Rusty, the little maintenance diesel, was taking a long stone train to the transfer yard at Crovensgate. Donald and Douglas were waiting for him, along with some empty trucks, as well as already loaded vans.
"That's a big load you got there, Rusty,"
Donald commented.
"Where's it all coming from?"
"Why, in the quarry, of course,"
replied Rusty.
"This mountain rock is good for many things. It is a lot of work, but I do appreciate the change. Maintenance and odd jobs is all I've done since coming here."
He paused. The cheerful expression on his face suddenly turned into a frown.
That being said, it is rather dangerous up there.
"Really? How so?"
asked Douglas.
Well, there's this massive boulder on one of the hills. The workmen say there's nothing to worry about, but this may sound strange. I think it's watching me.
Donald let off steam loudly.
"Rubbish! Don't be ridiculous, Rusty! How's that even possible? Boulders don't have eyes!"
Rusty sighed and looked back at the train being unloaded.
That may be, Donald, but there's something strange about this one.
Just then, Henry arrived with his pickup goods. As well as picking up more trucks, he needed to drop some off. Among them was a flatbed, and stood upon it was a bright orange machine that had 2 large drills on its front.
"What's that?"
asked Rusty.
"He's called Thumper. I had to pick him up from Barrow,"
replied Henry.
"I don't know what he is exactly, but apparently he helps collect rock faster. I believe he's here for the new quarry, Rusty."
Soon, Thumper was working hard. His front drills were used to dig rock out from the mountains. Before long, it was coming at a higher rate, and stone trains became longer. The miners were pleased, and so was the thing controller. But no one bothered to check the boulder. Stones on the mountain it stood upon began to weaken from the vibration of Thumper's drills. The only one who showed concern of this was Rusty, but when he told the others, Duncan and Sir Handel weren't convinced.
Don't get me wrong, Rusty. I do like you. But I think you're overreacting to all this.
Duncan said.
Indeed.
Chuckled Sir Handel.
All this extra work has gone to your radiator.
You can say all you like, but there's something about Boulder that's not right. Something the thing controller isn't paying attention to.
Rusty, do yourself a favor and relax.
Just then, Rusty's driver returned from the staff room.
Come on, Rusty, one more train from the quarry and we're done for today,
he said. Rusty was nervous, but said nothing as he set off up the line. It had started to rain as he went along, and by the time he arrived at the quarry, all the miners had left and all the machinery was covered up. Rusty found the trucks on the siding and buffered up to them. His driver coupled him up and went to talk to the guard in the brake van. Rusty gazed up and shivered as above him stood the boulder. He couldn't take his eyes off it, as he thought he could see something within the rock, staring back at him. His shivering got worse.
Is that a face?
Rusty jumped in shock as a large slab of rock landed on the rails next to him. As the driver threw it away, he looked up, concerned.
We better get going. Hopefully the weather will be better tomorrow. The rain has loosened some of this rock.
Rusty didn't reply. He felt very uneasy. He looked back up at the boulder, and what he thought he saw was a face was now gone. However, this didn't make Rusty feel any better. He then turned his gaze towards the slablet that fell. As the driver entered his cab, he whispered quietly,
I think it's Boulder wanting us to go away.
Without another word, Rusty left the quarry. Rusty didn't sleep well that night, and was exhausted the next morning. Duncan was next to him, and decided to have some fun.
Off to the quarry again, Rusty. Well, in that case, beware of the big scary boulder. Scary boulder indeed. He's as tame as a pet rabbit,
he added as he puffed away. Reneus was on the other side of the shed, and watched Rusty making his way to the quarry once again. He then noticed Skarloey arranging a train of trucks. He puffed alongside him.
Do you think we should have said something?
He asked, worried.
Considering Rusty's recent behavior, it was a mistake to keep it secret.
Sighed Skarloey.
I didn't believe those stories, but now I'm not so sure.
I'm going up to the quarry this afternoon with some workmen, so I'll tell Rusty everything.
Leave that to me, my friend. I'm going up there now with more equipment for the miners. I would like you to inform the Thin Controller about this. I don't know if he believes in this sort of thing, but he must know regardless.
Reneus wasn't sure. The Thin Controller had put a lot of work into the new quarry, so he might not be pleased if he had to break it all down. However, for the safety of everyone, it had to be done.
Alright, Skarloey, you have my word.
As Rusty and his driver had hoped, the weather had greatly improved from yesterday, and the sun shone above them. The quarry was now filled with more machines, including Thumper, who was working harder than ever. Rusty was working some distance from all the noise and dust the machines were making, and was actually near the boulder. He soon realised that probably wasn't the best idea. As he began to move away, he noticed something in the corner of his eye. There was a small rock slide on the side of the mountain next to him. None of the machines were close by, so they couldn't be the cause. He then looked up.
Boulder's moving.
Don't be so daft. It can't.
But it could, and it did. It went over the edge and crashed to the ground in front of the little diesel, who felt like a small rat compared to its scale. Rusty began to back away in intense fear, but the boulder seemed to have other ideas.
It's rolling along our line.
Rusty tooted his horn loudly to get the miners' attention. They looked away from their work and were horrified at the sight, but were too far away to be of any help. Rusty hurried down the mountain away from the quarry. Boulder wasn't far behind, as the ground constantly shuddered as if there was an earthquake. Suddenly, just ahead, the driver saw a set of points, with one line being a siding. They reached it just in time, and Boulder thundered by. Rusty was relieved both he and his driver survived, but he knew it wasn't over.
If we heard it crossing Carwin, we can phone the yards and warn them. Let's hope there are no more engines in its path.
Meanwhile, Scarlery was making his way up to the quarry with some mining equipment. Or at least, that was the plan. Then, he heard a strange rumbling sound in the distance. Before he could do or say anything, Boulder came into view and charged towards the little engine.
Yikes!
He shouted as he shot backwards away from the boulder. The trucks saw it too and were horrified. On! On! Bump him! Bump him! Make him go faster! Make him go faster! They yelled. With this surprising encouragement, Scarlery was able to reach a high speed, but Boulder was catching up to them fast. As they approached Krosny Kurin, a signalman diverted them into a siding. Boulder destroyed a water tower as it flew by and nearly hit the station platform. The passengers were not hurt, but were shocked and shaken. So were Scarlery and the trucks. Just then, Rusty hurried in, concerned at what he saw.
Scarlery?
I'm fine, but we must warn the yards.
Quickly, their drivers rushed into the station.
Do you know if any other engines are coming up the line?
Scarlery was about to reply, but then froze and gasped.
Rheneas! He said he was coming up earlier. He could... We have to go now!
Rheneas was coming up the line with Agnes, one of the railway's coaches, filled with workmen. She was the only coach available and wasn't happy.
I'm a first-class coach, not an affiliate important works band,
she complained. Rheneas sighed. He was annoyed, as he hadn't had a chance to speak with the Fin controller. Suddenly, he heard a rumbling sound from up ahead.
I said, what's that?
Then, Boulder hurried round the bend towards them. Rheneas couldn't believe it.
It can't be! It's running loose! Yikes!
His driver drove him back as fast as he could, while Agnes wailed frantically. However, his speed couldn't outrun the large rock monster that gained on them. As he was sure he was about to get crushed, he felt a large bump and found himself leaving the rails and resting on the ground, inches from the boulder as it went past.
I knew there was something wrong with these tracks, though I didn't think they would save us.
Some of the workmen were injured after being jolted from their seats during the derailment, but realized it could have been much worse. Agnes, on the other hand, was very upset. Some ballast had flew off the ground when Boulder came into contact with it and had hit her windows.
I feel so smashed. I feel so smashed.
Rather a smash than a squash.
Meanwhile, at the yards, Sir Handel and Duncan were arranging trucks of stone for Donald's train.
Does that diesel of yours still believe there's some living boulder at the quarry?
I tried to snap him out of it, but he's still convinced.
I have to give him credit, though, for being able to put up with all this dusty, dirty work.
Just then, the sound of something big coming their way could be heard.
What on earth was that?
His question was soon answered, as there, charging towards them, was the boulder.
Oh my god! It can't be!
Donald quickly moved to a safe distance, and so did the workmen, but Sir Handel and Duncan were still in the sidings and could only go forwards. If they did that, they would run into the exact thing they wanted to get away from. The two engines were trapped and couldn't bear to look at what was approaching them. They closed their eyes tightly. After hearing a crash and an explosion, but feeling nothing, Duncan and Sir Handel opened their frightened eyes. They saw that the boulder had aimed for the engine shed, which was now nothing more but rubble and engulfed in flames.
How did the fire start?
I don't know. There wasn't any fuel or dynamite in there. Surely the boulder didn't cause it, right?
No one had an answer. A few hours later, the fire had been put out, and the Thing controller arrived to inspect the damage. Scar, Lowy and Rusty were also there, along with Rhaenyra, who had been re-railed.
I can't believe this. This is just so unnatural.
The Thing controller said.
I don't know what to say, sir. It was moving directly towards us, but then it turned towards the shed.
Don't worry, Sir Handel. You don't need to say anything. I don't understand it either.
That must have broke my beautiful polished windows. It's disgraceful.
Growled Agnes.
Well, considering the damage this boulder just caused, Agnes, you should be thankful you got out of its path.
Replied the Thing controller sternly. Rusty didn't know what to think. While he thought no one was watching, he moved onto a siding near the transfer yards. However, Scar Lowy noticed this and went over to see him. Rusty couldn't hold back the tears that had built up in his eyes. It was all too much for him.
I'm sorry, Rusty.
No, I'm sorry. I knew something was wrong, and I should have told you, or the Thing controller, or anyone. If I did, this wouldn't have happened. Look at everything. All this is because I didn't speak up.
Scar Lowy looked down at his buffers in shame.
No, it's because I didn't speak up.
Rusty's tears stopped in their tracks after that statement. The old engine took a deep breath. Now, the full truth came out.
The quarry at Wardfell was once a copper mine that was around long before our line was built. When it was built, we took control of the mine and would bring ore to the transfer yards. It then closed in 1909, and many believed it was because of the ore traffic was drying up. While that did happen, that wasn't the main reason.
Then, what is it?
Strange things often happen up there. Miners would report sightings of objects and trucks moving by themselves, without any explanation. Needless to say, me and Rhaenyra were uncomfortable every time we went there. Then, on one fateful day, I was approaching one of the mountains with some empty trucks, when I heard a loud alarming explosion. When I arrived, I saw that boulder among the ruins of a workman's hut that was in flames. A miner claimed that the boulder had moved on its own and crushed the hut. While there was little evidence to support this, that incident, along with everything else, was enough for the controller at the time of the mine to shut down. No one seemed to know how the boulder was able to move as if it was alive. It was something that simply shouldn't happen. I didn't tell the Thing controller, not just because I never properly witnessed these events myself, but also because I assumed whatever it was that caused them had long gone. It has been just over 60 years now. I'm sorry you had to go through all that, Rusty.
Rusty, still sniffing, gave a small smile.
It's alright, Scarloey. It's not your fault. At least no one was seriously hurt.
Scarloey noticed that the Thing controller had seen and heard everything.
I think our controller knows what to do next.
The Thing controller nodded and walked slowly away towards one of the workmen.
How long will it take to rebuild the shed?
Can't say, sir. There's not much left.
Do what you can today, but tomorrow I'll have a much bigger job for you and your crew.
The following day, the Thing controller announced that the quarry was going to be shut down. Scarloey offered to take a works train to rip up the line leading to it, while Rusty took his morning passenger train. The Thing controller watched as the workmen took up the rails and sleepers one by one before loading them into trucks. He noticed Scarloey looking glum through the whole process.
You didn't do anything wrong, Scarloey. I should have researched more about this place before opening it.
Well, like Rusty said, no one was seriously hurt, and that's the important thing.
The Thing controller began to walk away, but then stopped and looked back.
We should have left this part of the island alone,
he said thoughtfully. Scarloey couldn't agree more. Eventually, the mines of Waterfell were abandoned once more, never to be operated again. The shed was reconstructed within a month and was even extended to fit more engines. During that time, the carriage shed had just enough room to house one engine, along with all the coaches. Scarloey and Renea saw to it that Rusty was the one to have this room to rest. The other engines, even Duncan and Sir Handel, were respectful to this. Because of their support, Rusty was able to heal quickly from his traumatic experience, and is happy with his maintenance runs and odd jobs. Boulder was moved to a hill near the quarry in view of the railway, as a reminder that sometimes reusing old grounds can have severe consequences. Rusty is sure that on a clear night it is gazing up at the mountain, and that its sides are being carried on the wind to where it once used to stand, proud and silent. I wonder if Rusty is right. Don't you?
Ha 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 ha!